Well, I'll admit that I have not given this a lot of thought over my life, what my favorite letter is, and probably it could change daily. But today I'm going to go with the letter I. It's a vowel. I think vowels are important, and it starts the words inevitably, intricate, and imbrications, which are all wonderful words. Okay, so I'm going to answer this in two ways. The first way would be if I were sheltering in place with my family, and if that's the case, I think I would probably shelter in place with Winnie the Pooh because he seems like he's got the small life down pat, and would be an easy hang. Now, if I were sheltering in place with one person on my own, it may be Kate, the protagonist from David Markson's Wittgenstein's Mistress, because she's the last person on Earth, and so she's probably really good at survival and would appreciate the company. Again, this is something that probably changes frequently. I do like sort of longer descriptive titles where something interesting can be happening in the title. So right now I'm going to say Olga Tokarczuk's Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. The title is from Blake, but you know, any sort of long title like that. Yana Harvey's new book, You Don't Have to Go to Mars for Love, that's a fantastic title. They're both meander and they're full of character, which is, I think, what I find so inviting about them. Oh, on my nightstand there are probably 20 books. At the top of it right now, Paisley Rekdal's Nightingale, which I'm rereading, is an amazing book from last year. Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway. I read Orlando for the first time in my life recently, and it was such an amazing book that I picked up Mrs. Dalloway right away. John Murillo's Contemporary American Poetry, which came out this year, is there. I also have a Kindle that's by my bedside, and I actually just downloaded from the Austin Public Library David Copperfield. I love Charles Dickens. I love, you know, getting lost in his stories. I think there's something about the scale of the lives that he is writing about that really is affecting to me. And also, he's a writer where the possibilities within the language, like there's such a palpable excitement in his writing over what he's able to do with the language that is really attractive to me and really provides a lot of consolation for me. As a writer, what animal? A very tired pack horse whose lead is being pulled by two songbirds. My advice is to write, just write. You need to write. That is my advice, is to write. Aside from that, I would say, you know, when I'm writing, I often find that I have sort of hovering over my shoulder the shaggy, bemused head of my old writing professor, Stanley Plumley, saying some variation on the word ha, depending on how I perceive he would find the quality of whatever it is I'm writing on. He's saying, huh, or ha, or whatever. So my advice would be find your own Stanley Plumley who can hover above you and keep writing until you get the satisfying variation on ha from them. I have a lot of different books that I remember reading when I was a kid. I think the first one that I remember really sort of diving into, and I don't know that it was necessarily age appropriate, but was Edith Hamilton's Mythology. There was something about the stories there that were really captivating, and I could get lost in them. And I remember reading and rereading the little mass market copy of that we had in our house. Oh, well, this is something that also probably changes daily depending on the news in the world, and what that means is I probably would need it to be a small, kind, consoling story where not a whole lot happens, and my reading doesn't tend in that direction most often. You know, most writing is more dramatic than that. But you know, to find a small world where not a whole lot happens, I mean, maybe Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, where there's just people standing around talking a little ridiculously, and they're waiting for something that never comes. Yeah, Waiting for Godot, that's where I'd want to be. I remember early on in a manuscript that I was working on, somebody reading it and asking me why I use the word blue so much, but it was fairly incidental. I think these days, probably the word or two words that someone would say are fire and hand. You know, they're both sensory and necessary, and there's some inherent drama in both of them that apparently I'm attracted to. Well, that would probably have to be Richard Hugo's Triggering Town. You know, the idea of how he walks you through finding the thing it is that triggers you or inspires you, and how you need to sort of write through that thing is really helpful to me. And he's also just incredibly practical. You know, there's one chapter in there, if I recall, where he is literally kind of giving you, do this thing in it and go and see what happens. And you know, as a launching off point, giving you those requirements or those restrictions can be really helpful, because it gives you a place to start. Well, my book only just came out, so I have yet to find any real interesting reviews of it. There are individual poems, glosses on individual poems that are out on the internet, that I've read from time to time, and they're mostly laudatory. They want to know, oh, what's going on with this poem? Why is it working? I do remember years ago when I was in graduate school, doing a reading with a couple of people, and I had a friend who was teaching who required her students to attend a poetry reading and write about it. And so my friend, shared with me a review that an undergraduate student had written of the poetry reading, and it was mostly pretty antagonistic, like, why do I have to be here? This is such a waste of time. You know, this is all so boring. But there was like one line in there about how, oh, this Charlie guy was pretty okay, I guess. You know, he was easy to understand. Laundry or the dishes. You know, I like tasks that have like a clear set of actions, and there's a clear sort of start and finish, and something has changed at the end. The dishes are clean, the laundry is folded and put away. Although I will say I find that when I'm doing any of those things, you know, my mind is able to drift some, and I'll inevitably, like, a word or a line or something will pop into my head, and I'll have to stop and write it down. So I am avoiding writing, but always sort of wind up doing something that brings me back into writing. Dish. There are definitely books out there that underwhelm me, that get a lot of popular praise. I think, just to be kind, I will say Gustave Flaubert's A Sentimental Education is a book that I have tried reading twice, and each time quit, just sort of bored by. I haven't been able to get into it. Although I will freely admit that more than likely the issue is on my end and not on Flaubert's. Everybody's got to say Kafka, right? Because Kafka would have the most interesting answers, probably. But Kafka aside, you know, I would probably think like a 20th century writer, just so that we would have something in common and there'd be a lot to draw on. 20th or 21st century writer. Maybe like Laurie Moore, because I feel like the answers would be hilarious, or like Lydia Davis, because again, it would be hilarious, but she would, as a writer and translator, have so much to offer. I would love to hear what they would have to say. I would want to know what books they don't get, what all the fuss was about. Well, maybe Bohumil Hrabal's Too Loud a Solitude. It's one of my favorite novels, and I've read it a bunch of times. It's also small, it's easy to carry, so it wouldn't take up space. That, or maybe Yusuf Komunyakas' Talking Dirty to the Gods is a book that I can sort of read endlessly, or the selected poetry of Larry Levis, the Selected Levis. Although if it's a natural disaster and it's something, I would probably want to try to save something that would not be easily replaceable. And in that case, maybe CD writes, I just got a copy recently of her out of print, the translations of Gospels back into tongues. And so that would be trickier to replace. So maybe that's the book that I would grab. And also, the translation of Gospels back into tongues is one of my votes for favorite book title of all time. Well, probably by default, I am a PC, because that's the computers that I tend to use are PCs, although I do have Apple products strewn throughout my house, so I guess I'm a hybrid of both. Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of a trick answer here and say A Fan's Notes by Frederick Exley, mostly because I hate that I've never been able to find a copy of the film adaptation anywhere to watch. I think it was like a Canadian production in like the 70s starring Jerry Orbach, but I've never been able to watch it, and I hate that about it. Well, I am fortunate in that I am married to an amazing poet and reader of poetry, Sasha West. She, can be supportive and is really interested in what I'm doing, but doesn't hesitate to tell me if something is not working or to help me think through things. So she certainly is the person that I most trust to read my work. Maybe Jory Graham, but mostly because I am in awe of what her brain is able to do and how she's able to see through things, and I would love to live inside her brain for a while, and get the benefit of that level of intelligence and inquiry. Well, this is definitely one that has changed over the years. When I was younger, I kind of grew up on lots of different music, but, predominantly like rock and punk and metal and that kind of thing. And so I would write to what I was listening to, what I was interested in. That has changed a lot over the years. I think I find that I need to be able to concentrate on what I'm doing, so something that's less sonically insistent is important. So, there's a lot of Brian Eno, Music for Airports, the Stranger Things soundtrack by the guys from the band Survive. It's great because it's ambient, it's background, but it's got this real range of emotions in it, and can be really eerie in ways that are satisfyingly unsettling. I do still sometimes listen to metal of a sorts when I'm writing, though it tends to be more like Earth or Sun, bands that are more ambient doom metal. The thing that I probably listen to the most consistently when I'm writing is the music of John Fahey, in particular the Transfiguration of Blind Joe Death. He's like a folk guitarist, or started as a folk guitarist, and that record is sort of folk guitar, and there's such a range of emotion in what he's doing. There's this humor and sorrow, and it's all so delicate and beautiful, or can be, that it's something that I've listened to it so much that I can tune it out if I want to. It can just sort of be in the background, or I can really, if I need to step away from the writing, it can suddenly become really present, and I can really sort of cover myself with it. And the emotions, the kinds of emotions that he explores in his music, I find I'm very in tune with. So John Fahey, get yourself some John Fahey and write to it. Bathrooms, lots of bathrooms. Years ago, I worked on a farm in West Virginia, and there was the only interior space that I could be in was like this porta potty, and I definitely remember like going into the porta potty and like pulling out a piece of paper and writing on it, since I knew my boss would not appreciate knowing that I was taking a break from whatever I was supposed to be doing to write. So yeah, strangest place is a porta potty. Well, the honest answer is probably the space bar, right? Because there's always a space between words. But short of that, I would probably say the delete button, because I revise and cut and delete a lot as I'm writing. So the delete button. I would definitely Bohemel Too Loud a Solitude, as I mentioned earlier. But I think in this case, I'm going to go with the 2-volume-in-1 combined volume British edition of Bridget Begin Kelly's Song and the Orchard. The 2 books in a single volume, and you know, her work has meant so much to me over the years, and those 2 books are so unapologetically visionary and weird, but also so clear in what they are doing, that I will never get tired of reading them, and I never cease to find them astonishing. Well, I mean, here in Austin, I love Malvern Books. You know, the way that they curate their fiction and poetry, I think, is really impressive. I love the Marfa Book Company in Marfa, Texas, as a great destination, and the people who run it there, they tend to have really interesting poetry. You know, I'm from the DC area, grew up there, and so Politics and Prose there is a place that I spent a lot of time over the years, and try to go back to whenever I'm there, because I tend to find interesting things at Politics and Prose. Creative endeavor, probably art. You know, that's my first love, probably the first place where I really got excited about the possibilities of making and creating. You know, my daughter is 7, and we'll sit down and we'll draw together, and it's incredibly satisfying to use oil pastels or colored pencils, and to get to make these lines. See, like the rate of construction, like seeing you make a line and it's there, I find really, really satisfying. So I would definitely be drawing. I mean, I guess I draw anyway, but I would be doing it a whole lot more, if I were not writing. I'm going to say fortunate. I would like to be and be known as a fortunate writer. Hey, thank you for watching. I'd like to encourage you to seek out a copy of my new book, The Newest Employee of the Museum of Ruin, and it's available now through 4-Way Books, and it's on their website, 4waybooks.com, or you can find it wherever you sate your literary needs. Thank you.